everybody, Gurmy's Coast Yard here, and in today's episode of Germanator Studios, we are continuing work on our spooky Salem themed area. And to start, you'll see me go through a variety of flat rides. And what I ended up doing was placing a handful sort of around the perimeter of our town that we built, or our town square. I'm starting here with the Ferris wheel, and I ended up sort of having a little like fairground type thing. So I ended up calling it the FEARground, and the name was inspired by one of the haunted house attractions at Cedar Point called the FEARground Freak Show, and so I sort of went with that theme because I had all these like spooky themed flat rides, and it felt fitting. Um, and I like the idea of like this sort of old abandoned ghost town have that has it was like somehow abandoned in the middle of this like town fair, and yeah, it seemed like a spooky idea, and it seemed like a nice way to tie it into the theme park and include some rides in a way that makes sense. So you can see I've started with the Ferris wheel, which I called the Ferris wheel. And I also put the little monster merry-go-round ride in. I don't think we gave that one any special name. I think I just named it like Monster Go Around or something like that. And here you can see me experimenting with the, I don't remember, I think it's called like the Skull Swing or something, but I believe we end up calling it the Skeleton Swing. But I didn't like it in that spot, so I ended up picking another spot for it. But in the meantime, we put in the Spider Top Spin ride, and I believe we call this one the Web Spinner. A pretty straightforward and fitting name for that. And I put that one sort of right up front because it's one of the bigger thrill rides, so I figured it would be beneficial to sort of have it load, like have the line for it right on the main midway of the park, if you can call it that. But that main perimeter that goes around the lake is sort of the heavy traffic or pathway of the park. So I put that bigger ride right off the end of that. And here you can see we put our little skeleton swing back in this corner here. And I believe at this point we've gone through all of the rides with a spooky theme. But there was room for one more flat ride, and so I just went through the generic thrill rides list, and I ended up picking the Enterprise. And see if you can guess what I named this before I end up naming it. Those of you who know I worked at Cedar Point will get it pretty quick, and that was a hint for you too. Anyhow, I'm about to rename it, and if you thought I was going to name it the Witch's Wheel, you were correct. So, yeah, for those of you who don't know, the Witch's Wheel was an Enterprise ride at Cedar Point that closed, I want to say at the end of 2017, but I do not remember exactly. Not that it matters too much. Anyhow, so we put that in there, and then eventually, at some point, okay, maybe not yet, but eventually we'll turn the Ferris wheel, I should say, around. But for now, I was experimenting with some lighting along the path. I haven't settled on anything just yet because I decided I wanted to redo this queue line here. I wanted it to be a little more slim and less winding all around itself. Despite that it's a spider-themed ride, I wanted the queue line to be easily navigable, and not too long. So we did it as pretty straightforward, just like the other queue lines in the area. And then along here you can see I decided to just put the mining lamp, the western lamp, in. I figured it fit with the sort of look of the town, and in theory this would be like a gas-lit lamp, which is what would have been available to people at that time. So I thought it fit just fine with the theme. Yeah, what else do we do? I'm just looking around at this point, I guess. Yes, so I decided to put some different fences around our little guillotine here. Just sort of change this little structure up a little bit. I ended up getting rid of the porch with the stairs, because I figured the stairs would probably be a tripping hazard, and guests may also see them and feel encouraged to climb them and mess around on that scenery piece. Obviously, if this was in a real theme park, the guillotine would not be real or dangerous, but you still wouldn't want guests messing around with it. And so obviously we had the fences, but I took out the stairs leading up to them just to discourage any guests from going where they shouldn't, and also putting the different fencing in there just to sort of look a little nicer. Although, depending on your feedback or just what I'm thinking, I may change that back, because it sort of goes against the wood theme. You also noticed just there we switched out the guillotine for the little heads, the stock piece or whatever, with the skeleton. I figured it was a little more family friendly for the park, and a little less gory, even though the guillotine itself doesn't have any blood or anything. Just the theme and the idea of it, I feel like doesn't is a little too dark for a theme park, especially for this theme park. Maybe at Thorpe Park out in England, it would work better. But we're not Thorpe Park. We're more family oriented here at Germanator Studios at the Isle of Ages. So, yeah. Anyhow, the other thing you see me doing is trying to pick a way for that Ferris wheel queue to go, and I believe that changes from how it currently is. Yeah, because I didn't want it wrapping all the way around the back. Um, in fact, I don't think I really wanted much to happen around the back to begin with of the rides. I wanted that to sort of be the border of this land. So you can see I sort of wrapped it back around toward the front on the other side. And putting in a tree line here just to sort of border off the area. And I'll do some more work in the next episode, I believe. I think we still have a couple episodes at least left in our spooky area. But eventually I would like to do some more work, obviously, to close off the border and make it look a little nicer. In the meantime, you'll notice we have adjusted the queue line in this little pathway. The queue lines, I should say, to have a path extend back here. And I'm putting in these fences now. You might be able to guess what I'm building, because I think it's pretty cliche, but we are getting ready to build the facade for our haunted house attraction, and this is going to be pretty similar idea, or a pretty similar idea to the Haunted Mansion at Disney World or at the Disney parks. And here you can see me messing around with the queue, but this will change. I eventually designed the structure and the queue sort of together because it made the most sense. But anyhow, and you'll see what I do, because I didn't want to have a staircase in my queue. So you'll see what I do to avoid that. But in the meantime, you can see me starting with some different structural ideas and experimenting with wall pieces. And to start, I knew I wanted to have like a grandiose sort of facade and something that really felt like it was a mansion and a big like Victorian type house that you would not want to be alone in the dark. And I'm pretty proud of what I came up with. And you'll see I used the pillars. I used a similar design to our museum in the entrance area of the park. The museum being the facade for our launched tomb themed ride. I think we called it Osiris. It's been so long, I just can't remember all these things. Goodness. Geez, stop looking at me like that. Sorry. Anyhow, and you'll see here I experimented with the like spooky house walls and roofs, and this was more or less just to get an idea of sort of what I had to work with in terms of the scale of this facade. But I end up going with different pieces in a moment. I'll let the footage roll for a minute and just explain things as they happen. But I wanted to get an idea for, how the windows and things would work and how I could place things. And I wasn't really set on this wall set because it's a little too, I don't know if dorky is the right word, but it's kind of dinky, if you know what I mean. Like it's all crooked and cute, and certainly not bad for just a general like haunted house bazaar type thing. but I wanted something a little more menacing and something that felt a little more real for this attraction, at least for the primary facade that people see walking up. And I'm sure we will use the actual like spooky house pieces on the inside. Um, However, here you can see the pieces I settled on are the block wall pieces, and those are pieces I don't use a lot, so it was nice to get to use them here. And you can see I sort of came up with a nice slim, too tall window, and it rounds off at the top, which I think looks really nice. And of course, we have the round window over the doorway, so it feels a lot more elegant and a lot more fitting to the theme. You'll notice that the staircase leading up to the entrance is not accessible to the guests. So I ended up using the queue line stairs more or less as a scenery piece. However, the queue line branches off to the left, and I did that, as I said earlier, to avoid having stairs in the queue to make it more accessible. Real quickly here, you can see me replacing the wood porch for a slate porch. I felt like it would be more fitting for the theme, and then adding a 1/3 height wall as a lip along the edge, just to extend it outward from the brick base a little bit. So anyway, I like to make my queue lines, or my rides at the very least, even if it's just an exit ramp. But I try to make them accessible. Um, like if this was in the real world, it would be accessible to wheelchairs. Is the idea. Not that there are wheelchairs in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, but it's more or less the idea of it that I try to consider. Just considering realistic design, if nothing else. So the queue wraps around to the left and enters through the side of the house, and then it'll go back through the foyer area, and then down into probably the loading station, but we don't get that far in today's episode. For right now, you can just see me laying out the queue and trying to make it work. Um, and yeah, this is pretty boring for a moment. I don't know what else to say. I'm gonna have a coughing fit real quick. I'm gonna mute this, but I'm gonna do that and then talk when it gets relevant again. All right. So here you can see me extending the walls a little further, adding sort of wings to the building, and I don't have any plans on making it any wider than 3 blocks, I guess, or 3 tiles past the main facade. And that's just because it doesn't really need to be. This is, like I said, it is just a facade, and this is just a little building for the queue to go into. But the rest of the building will be similar to our dinosaur dark ride, and that it's just a generic building, and it'll be behind the scenes and more or less masked by just the border of the other lands. And this is inspired. That concept is inspired by the Haunted Mansion at Disney World, in that the mansion you see is not the building the ride actually takes place in. It actually sort of goes into a building you can't see behind the ride. Splash Mountain, rest in peace, does the same thing as well. Anyhow, here you can see me building a nice grand fireplace for the foyer. It's probably a little bigger than it would be if it were in real life. Just it probably would not be so wide, but this is the foyer, and this is a really elegant mansion, so I figured it looks fine. I mean, we even put the little parapet pieces on the top, so it looks like a very elegant fireplace. And of course, a little iron grating in there, so people don't burn their hands or anything. And you'll notice I put the fire pit pieces in there as well from the spooky scenery set, just to add a little more depth and realism to that build. And you can see I built the fireplace 4, I think, tiles, or 4 wall heights in height. I don't know how to say that sentence. But I built it tall because I do want it to go through the roof in the end, on the back side, just to make everything feel complete. And this building, even though it's a facade, and even though it's not an actual like Victorian type mansion or whatever, I definitely wanted it to architecturally feel like one, at least everywhere that the guests can see it or experience it. So anyhow, you can see I'm putting walls in here, and I was trying to pick colors that worked. I feel like when you see haunted houses, the colors, when I say the colors that worked, I mean colors that don't quite work. Like there's always these weird like faded pastel colors. And I'm not saying that orange colored there was the right choice. Um, but in terms of just having like colors that are slightly off, like you can see we have that sort of green, like almost turquoise colored carpet and the violet colored walls in the foyer. Just things that they feel like they're dated, I should say. So that's sort of the idea I was going for, and I decided to extend the wall of the violet colored walls a little bit into the front, just so the fireplace was a little cut off from the front of the building. Um, this build, I should say, some of these builds were loosely inspired by a friend of mine's house. Not that he lived in a house this big or anything, but it's what came to mind when I was building this, and it's the house of a friend of mine from elementary school, of all things. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. So this is loosely inspired by that in terms of how like the foyer sort of has that little front section, and then it goes into the main full height area with the chimney and everything. Um, and here I just putting some pumpkin pieces in. I don't know if those will stay, but that was just to add some texture. And here I decided to put the little skulls on the spikes behind the windows, so that way people who are looking in from the front of the building will see them peeking through, and it'll just add some eeriness. And I put the little skull warriors out front. And oh, it looks like we're at the end of today's episode. So here are some additional pictures of our builds today, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.